and they want to apply that in with their new career. So bottom line, anyone who wants to manage a project's budget, performance, or forecast could possibly use Cobra. And with that, I'm going to hop into Cobra. So when a user logs into Cobra, this is what they're going to see. They're going to see a list of their projects. Got a whole bunch of projects here. You can very easily group them into what we call master projects to make it a little bit more easier to navigate. You do have the ability, I'm just going to show you here. You can insert columns into this main view. As you see, there are lots and lots of different columns available. You know, your contract name, phase, contract ID, you know, hours, various calculations, you know, percent ranges, you name it, you can add it. You can also drag and drop columns around in here based on your preference as to how you'd like to see the data. Navigation's pretty simple. You know, main project list here. Over on the left, we have some navigation to different areas. The first at the top is projects, then the ancillary or the core files that go along with any Cobra project. Calendar, codes, rates, and resources. And then, of course, there's a couple of areas to get to reporting, all reports, your personal reports, and then batch reporting. And then across the top is navigation, you know, and based on where you are, you'll see different options. As I go into a project, you know, I see a whole bunch of different options up here that are enabled. A lot of those were not enabled when I was out on the main view because they only apply when you're within a project. And then this would be what a project would look like. You're able to, you know, move bars around, make one window bigger than the other. You know, we have the 4 main quadrants. We can open up to expand from, you know, the highest level control account view down to a work package view, and then from there down to the lowest level resource assignments. Also have the ability to toggle between, right now I'm showing hours over here. I can look at my total dollars and I see my total dollars. If I go to the appropriate time period, I can see where it's time phased. Down here in the bottom right, the time phase detail grid, we always see the complete breakout from hours all the way through currency. So however rates and factors have been applied, we'll see that breakout down here. And in a little bit, when I show the cost point to Cobra integration, talk a little bit about results. For those of you who work on the cost point side, we typically map cost point pools to these various results. Let me toggle back to hours. And then we have some more information over here on the bottom left, the tabbed quadrant. If you have any codes, which I don't think this one has any, you would see those there. And depending on what type of record you're on, you'll see different information. I'm going to open up the properties for this particular project. Looks the same for any project. The classes tab is where you can maintain and you can add new ones or delete some if you don't need them anymore. Classes, and classes are in 4 categories: budget, performance or progress, actual, and forecast. So depending on what type of data you want to track in Cobra, you'll add the appropriate type of class. And there's a lot of data validation through the integrations that come into play depending on the type of data. For example, a forecast it assumes that your forecast is all future activity. So it does validation, making sure you don't have things stuck in the past. Likewise with actuals, it's assuming that it's already incurred, it is in the past. So it's looking for validation to make sure you don't have actuals in the future, those sorts of things. It's very easy to define different rates. This particular project is using the default rates for forecast, and I know that because there's nothing populated here. If I were to go in here and pick a different rate set, awesome forecast rates, the next time I made a change to my forecast, it would apply these rates rather than the default project rates. Makes it very easy if you get new rates to see what that impact is on your project. You can even, I'm not sure if this one has it, I could very easily create a new forecast class. And I'll just leave all that. I could pick that different rate set. And now it exists. This copy classes button would enable me, and I'll just click on it here real quick, that I could very easily take that new class that I just created and copy it to all of my projects very, very quickly. So it makes it real easy. I'm not gonna run that now. To do maintenance, particularly in an enterprise type situation where you have a lot of different projects, it's very easy to keep them up to date with the current rates, those sorts of things. But with that, I really want to show you some of the integrations, because that's really Cobra's strength, is how it integrates with other products. So first, go over here to my Bright project, which is empty. It's a template. Cobra's great for templates. You could have a template project and just use this little save as icon to basically spin off a copy of it with a new name. It'll retain those core files, so whatever your default rates, resources, calendar, it'll keep all that with the new project. So in integration, you see over on the left, we have import options, and then on the right, export. And on the far left, we have Open Plan, of course, our own scheduling solution, Microsoft Project, Primavera, and Files. Microsoft Project, we support both Microsoft Project Professional and Server. And then Files comes into play most often during implementations where maybe they have data in some legacy system, not one of these. They're able to export their data to Excel and then import data into Cobra just from those Excel files. And I'll show that in a few moments. But today I'm going to pick Microsoft Project. I'm going to pick a saved configuration that I have. And the great news is it's saved. You can reuse them over and over and over again. Just navigating to the file there. Handful of screens. I'm not gonna talk about all of them. To select what type of data. This one I'm gonna bring in my project structure along with my resources. Again, this is the project I'm loading onto. I could do budget and or forecast. I'm just going to do budget today. And this is the key screen here. This is how Cobra knows how to consume that Microsoft Project schedule. So we're saying in the schedule, text field 2 aligns with my Cobra WBS. And text 4 aligns with my work package. I have some other elements here in the schedule, like maybe a CLIN or an IPT, or maybe a physical location. And I think, you know, on the work package, I have a charge number, but that's not in the schedule, so I'm not mapping that. But it exists in Cobra. So you can bring over just the basics, and really this screen pretty much represents the basics. These others are optional. Again, if you may need to report on the data or slice it that away, you're able to do that by bringing it in through this integration. Some other options, again, if you're you know, have an earned value contract, you're often going to have your earned value or progress technique in the schedule. But often for folks who maybe are doing EV late, trying to keep it simple, they'll let Cobra assign the technique based on the duration of the work package. I'm loading into my budget, but I could load into any budget class. So again, this happens to be a new project, but maybe if it was an existing project and you're considering a complete revamp of some future activities, you could load that in to, you know, like an unapproved budget class. So then it's there, you can look at the dollars, you can do some comparisons, but it's not going to have any impact on your formal budget until you say you want it to be included in that budget. And I'm just going to finish through here. I didn't make any changes. I'm not going to save it. It's only going to take it a minute to run. It's actually with Microsoft Project Server or Professional. I was linking to a professional file, so it links to the XML file that's generated from Microsoft Project. And I got a nice green check mark. You can look at the log, you know, to show you exactly what was done, how many records were imported. These logs are saved in the database. You can always go back and look at them later. And just like that, I have a project with my WBS, with work packages, and with resource assignments. And I didn't in this case, but you know, if you have your schedule and you know exactly how many hours, it's very easy. I could go and toggle back to hours and verify, yep, that's the right number of hours. You could do some additional filtering. We'll filter on, we'll pick Burns since he's at the top of this list. And I can see everywhere where Burns is assigned. And again, then I could go do the same thing on the schedule and verify my hours pretty easily. So without even having to run any reports, there's a lot of functionality to help validate your data immediately after it's been loaded. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to move on to my awesome project, and that one is going to be integrated from files. Again, I'm going to open an existing. You're going to see some similarities here. You know, same screen here. I'm just bringing in a few things, not as many options. I'm just navigating to the file, verify my project. See, I have this finish button here. At any point in time on a saved configuration, I could just click the finish and run it, but that wouldn't be any fun for today. I want to go through some of these screens. This is one of my favorite screens in Cobra. I think it was added probably, I think when Cobra 5 came out, so that's been a good number of years, but this file mapper. So it tells Cobra what data is in. It shows the first 10 rows of data. But then you're able to pick what is in that particular column. This one happens to be my WBS. This one happens to be my work package. You know, you see the list here, whole bunch of columns. They're not all required. In fact, you can see I only have about 14 columns of data in this file, and you know, there's a lot more columns than that. So quite a bit. You know, the minimum is pretty basic. Then you can bring in a lot of optional data as well. But my favorite is being able to ignore. So for some reason, you know, maybe your old system, or maybe you're pulling something out of your ERP system, has some data that you just don't need. You don't need to create a new format. Cobra can consume it. You can just tell it to ignore particular columns. So it makes it very, very powerful for integrating from, you know, maybe existing spreadsheet tools, or you know, if you have something that you're able to get out of some other system with minor modification. Over here, I only included hours, so Cobra is going to calculate all of these other rates and factors for me. If that data was available over here, if I had my hours and then maybe a column with direct, G&A, whatever the rates were, or these calculated values were, then it would not enable me, it would not allow me to calculate them over here. They wouldn't even show on the list. And with that, again, same thing, you know, this screen looks very similar. You pick your budget class. In this one, I'm going to load both budget and forecast at the same time. Very similar here, and I'm just going to go ahead and finish. Again, I started from a blank slate. Generally doesn't take too long. This file was a little bit bigger. I forget how many rows of data are in it, but it's going to show us in just a minute. And like a lot of the other Deltek products, you know, I know when I work in cost point, if you're running a process, it tells you, you know, where it is in that process, just like this one does here. Open my log, and 2,570 records were added. So this is a little bit larger file, 2,570 rows of data, and it only didn't take very long to update. I'm going to come back to this project in a few minutes. I'm going to hop over to cost point, because I'd like to show the cost point to Cobra actuals integration. So it starts over here in cost point. There's a handful of screens under the Cobra interface. It's under administration, and you can see how you get to it from here. One's in the middle here, from the manage Cobra charge templates down through the project mapping, basically defines how you're mapping your data from your Cobra project to your, from your cost point project to your Cobra project. For example, the charge template, I'm mapping from my project ID, and in this case, they mean, you know, the lowest level where the costs are actually incurred, typically where active and allow charging are checked. And I'm mapping that to my Cobra work package. My resource template, I'm saying map based on PLCs. And then for non-labor, from the GL account to a particular Cobra resource, the percent sign indicates that you can do some wildcarding. The cost template maps pools to results. Now, like here, these are all various like labor overhead type pools. I have them all mapped to a single overhead result. I could map them individually to different results. It's not unusual to see fringe maybe map to overhead as well. Again, depends on what you need. There's quite a bit of flexibility here, quite a few options. There are some advanced options, particularly on the resource template. For here to go into employee labor, like I used PLC, maybe, you know, PLC or GLC isn't enough. You know, maybe you want to take, you know, like the GLC and the org together and concatenate those to be your Cobra resource. You can do those sorts of things in the advanced, with the advanced option. The extraction parameters is the one where it really brings it all together. So I have my various templates here, some options over here that, you know, tell Cobra how to calculate the file. It knows that it's got inception to date data rather than maybe just period or sub-period data. If I just wanted to generate the CSV file, I would check this generate file only, but I'm gonna go for broke and leave this post valid transactions, which means it's going to, first of all, run the compute Cobra burdens process, and then it's going to launch Cobra Web Services and load that CSV actuals file directly into Cobra. Now, there have been some changes to this process lately because of cloud operations, and that's still evolving a bit. I've been working with a couple of clients on that, so it does behave a little bit differently, but the premise is still very similar. It's going to run this process, generate a file, call Cobra Web Services to load that file. And with that, I'm going to run it. Doesn't take too long. I'm only running it for one project on the previous screen. I limited it to just project 20220. So it shouldn't take too long. If I had any error messages, I would see them displayed down here at the bottom. I don't have any. I'm going to go ahead and just click OK there and jump over to this Cobra. This is the one that's connected to that particular cost point. And we see in the background here, we don't have any actuals. It's all zeros for the month of March. That was the month that I ran the data for. But I'm going to go ahead and look at my logs. You see, here's one. I'm going to open this one up. This should be the most recent one. Yep, that's today, just a moment ago. And kind of goes through, shows you how many records it loaded, so on and so forth. I can close that log. But it's nice, you know, on any project, you can go in and look at your logs. So it's really easy to go, you know, to be able to validate your data, to look where did something go wrong, to do maybe some forensics. If something looks peculiar, you can go in and go who ran what, when, maybe you need to update some training materials, that sort of thing. I'm going to go ahead and close that now and just refresh this view. And like that, I have actuals. And if I open this up a little bit, in fact, let's make it a little bit easier so we have that filtering available. Let's just look at actuals. And now I can see, you know, some of these where actuals came in this particular month. If I open it all the way up, I'll probably see some non-labor eventually. You know, there's, I think Aero was one of my non-labors, ODC. ODC was a good one, and Raw. So like that, you know, that integration works. Now, believe me, you know, it takes a little bit of trial and error to get that integration to work, but it does work. but it only brings over actuals. It doesn't help with project setup, so you'd have to have your control accounts and work packages already established. And that interface only exists with CostPoint and not with any of our other tools. Vision or Vantage Point are the ones that come to mind. I was on a call with a client just last week. They're using Vision, getting ready to update to Vantage Point, and they were looking at Cobra, and they were asking about, how do you get actuals over into Cobra? And, we talked about that a bit. If you get the data out of Vision, or when they go to Vantage Point, out of Vantage Point, and load it into Cobra, you have a lot of options. Cobra can do the calculations, apply the rates and factors, if you can't get the calculated values directly out of your system. That is an area where we hear a lot that they would like to see additional integrations with other products. Let me see, I'm going to jump over to reports real quick. And I'm going to go all the way over. I'll start over on the right and then highlight a few of these. All of Cobra's reports are published in Microsoft Excel. This workbook has, and I'm not even sure how many reports there are out of the box. It's over 30 different reports. And this, I think, need to thank Dan. I think he's the one that's responsible for setting this up. But this has an example of each of the reports. This is a popular one, time-phased, shows the data by time. In this example, it's monthly, could be quarterly, could be yearly. You have quite a bit of flexibility in how you slice and dice your data. You can have a couple different, call them calendar sets, in existence on a project to look at the data slightly different ways. The reports do a pretty good job of telling you how the report is run, in this case by control account and work package. And typically the work package, not always, but typically that relates to like a charge number, where the level at which you're actually incurring the cost. I could run it at by resource. You have quite a few options there, and I'm going to show you a few reports in a moment to show some of those different options. I want to go over to the project data report. This is a nice one for anyone who has an earned value program. So you see all of your earned value metrics, your budget in dollars over, we have additional info in hours as well. A lot of data on this particular report. My favorite here is the histogram. Nice graphic report. There are a few other graphic reports. This one has two indices with the bars representing period data and inception to date with the lines. Several reports as well with just a single axis. And the last report I want to show is this project cost set, where, instead of having, like on the time phased where you had a row for your budget and your earned and your actuals, has it in columns here. So depending on your audience or the type of data or what you need to do with it, there's pretty much a report that will get you what you need. But if not, they can be modified. Each of these reports has an Excel template behind it, and those templates can be modified. Some modifications are very simple, like maybe adding a company logo, or maybe a security header or footer disclaimer, maybe adding another column or two with some formulas, because since they're Excel based, you can add your own new formulas into a report. I'm going to go ahead back into Cobra. any questions before I hop into showing some of the other functions that are available in Cobra?
Hi, Mary. This is Gary Benning. Sorry, I'm a little bit later.
No problem. Did you have a question, Gary?
No, I just wanted to let you know that I had another meeting and I couldn't join as soon as I thought I could.
Well, I look forward to catching up with you sometime soon, Gary. I think I had an email out to you last week that I didn't. You replied back. I'll catch up with you maybe tomorrow.
Okay, that's fine.
Mary, over here under processes. Oh, yes.
Mary, this is Miriam. I have a question regarding risk assessment with Cobra. Is there any functionalities that a project manager can manage risk associated to a specific project?
Typically, risk would be handled within Acumen and then integrating with a schedule. That said, if you had a very large project, you could very easily have a maybe a code that had maybe a risk category or a risk level, or maybe even both of those, that could be integrated in from the schedule so that you could then run some reports or look at data into those categories. So you could run a report to go, okay, here's the status of my high risk activities, work packages and their control accounts within this project, and you could slice and dice it that way. But typically Acumen would be where we would do the risk management.
All right, thank you.
Hey Mary, one more question. For access, just a security question. When a user logs in, do they just see their projects, or do they always see all projects?
That is a great question. So I'm logged in here as a sysadmin user, but so I see everything. That said, and I'm going to open up this one particular project, there is an access control where I could limit access to a particular group of users, or in a large environment, maybe you have a group for project 1 and a different group for project 2, so that depending on what group you're assigned to, you'll only see the projects associated with that group. So you can slice and dice that access, and not only just for projects, for the rate files, the resources, some of those integrations I ran through, you could set those to where maybe you only allow one group to see them, and many of the things, and I'll just go ahead and show on a rate file, as that's a good example. On this rate file, I have access to it, but the world group can see it, but it's read-only. So everyone can see the rates, but very few people, in this case, Mary, would be the one who would be able to make changes and edit it.
Excellent, thank you.
So up here on the left, we have a group of processes called status. Those are your typical month-end processes that you're going to run through every month. You're going to advance your calendar from May to June, June to July. Each month you're going to do that. May or may not use a rolling wave. That would, in Cobra, that enables you, let's say you're planning for the most part in monthly, but you want a little bit more granularity. For maybe 1 month behind you and 2 or 3 months in the future. You could have it set up to expand those into maybe weekly buckets. And then as you move forward from month to month, it would collapse a month in the past and expand another month in the future. Calculate progress is the process of going through and calculating the earned value based on your status. And usually you'll integrate your status from a schedule, and that would bring in things like your actual start and finish dates, any forecast date changes, and percent completes. And then once that's done, assume you've integrated your actuals as well. I'm going to calculate your forecast. And Cobra has a handful of different methods to calculate forecast, ranging from a manual forecast where a project manager or a control account manager can go in and enter in hours by month, and then that is retained from month to month. It won't change unless you physically go in and change it, to statistical forecasts that will look at various elements of your performance to date. So if you're behind schedule and overrun on budget, there's a few statistical forecasts that will project that same level of performance for your future activities, and will produce an EAC that represents what those calculations suggest it will take to finish the project. And you can have more than one of those forecasts at any time. It's not unusual to have, a manual forecast or two, and then a handful of statistical forecasts, maybe a best case, worst case, to kind of bracket and did the PM's forecast, does it make sense? And generally, if it's within the range of the best case, worst case, then yeah, that's probably not too bad. Makes it easy to identify some outliers. Then we have another group of processes in here. I'm just going to talk about a few of them. Freeze forecast does exactly that. It freezes a forecast as of some point in time. It'll take your actuals as of that time plus your forecast and freeze it. Basically makes it read-only, but it's available for reporting and comparison purposes. So if you maybe do a bottoms-up EAC every quarter, you could, once that forecast has been finalized and approved, you could freeze it and then compare quarter over quarter, what does my EAC look like? So you always have that, that static data point from the last time, or maybe back from the beginning of the contract. Top-down planning enable you to make some wholesale adjustments at any level of the project, and I'll explain what any level of the project means in a moment. You could maybe reduce your hours by 5%, or maybe just take 10% out of your raw material costs. Recalc, you get new rates. You can calculate those new rates by using the recalc process. By default, just attaching a new rate file doesn't recalculate anything. Cobra assumes that whatever values are in here, you want them to stay as they are unless you tell it otherwise. So this recalc would be the thing to do to, to apply those new rates and factors. Probably one of everyone's favorites that uses Cobra is the reclass, and I'm going to show that one. Reclass allows you to copy or move data from one class to another. And when I said any level of the project on many of these processes, you can run it at total project or at a control account work package. Or remember some of those codes that I had like CLIN and IPT and location, I could run it at that level too. So maybe everything for CLIN 1 you need to maybe recalc. You could very easily do that without having to go through any manual steps. But for this, I'm going to leave it at total. And I am going to copy, let me look at my notes, make sure I pick the right one. I'm going to copy my forecast, and I'm going to copy it versus copy and delete. So the copy and delete would be more like a move. And I'm going to copy that to my PM forecast, and I'm going to replace it. Again, you have a few options there. I'm going to pick all time periods. Many of these processes have a time limiter as well, to where you can pick a particular data range to apply the change to. I'm going to finish. It's going to go through and let me go ahead and clear all my filters just to start from a clean slate. Before I had, if I open up one of these, we see I have budget, I have forecast, and now I have PM forecast. Interestingly, on this one, I'm going to go ahead and filter on Armstrong. And we'll look at this top one. So the budget and the forecast values are different. Both forecasts are the same at this point, but the budget is different. And that's because I had different rates applied to my forecast class when I did that integration from files a few moments ago. And if I toggle to hours, I can see that, yep, same hours, just different dollars down below. So very easy to manage that. And very easy to verify that, yep, when I did that reclass, it copied the data exactly as I was expecting. I see it across the board. It's also not unusual for folks who use Cobra. They also, they may bring some data in from the schedule, maybe their initial budget, but they may not manage their forecast in the schedule. They may want to do that within Cobra. And I could certainly go in here and, change, manually type in a number and change my hours, but I'm not going to do that. I'll leave it alone. Because that could be very, very time consuming. If you've got a large project, a lot of resource assignments, that would take quite a bit of time. So we have some export options as well. I'm going to start all the way over on the right with this assignment export, which is going to export data from this project, and I can tell it what I want here. I want we'll say I want the PM forecast. I could pick and choose if I only wanted, a couple of control accounts, but I'll go ahead and pick them all. And then I tell it where I want it to save. And it saves the file and opens up Excel. Nice time phase view, real easy, to just go in and make some changes. I actually made changes to another file. I'll import that one in a second. Over on the right, it has a total. So you're able to see the impact of the changes as you make them. You can add new resources in here. I could just insert a row and add some other resource, and that would be fine. But I'm going to go ahead and not make changes here. Back over on the left under integrations, I'm going to go over to the assignment import. And this is the file I had modified a little bit earlier today. I made some changes to just Armstrong. And it's doing some pre-validation before it actually gets to importing the data. And I could see here that a spread changed, which means the value changed for Armstrong, and I changed it in a handful of places. So it's pretty easy to see exactly what Cobra's going to do with the data. If I had added a new resource, it would tell you that there was a new resource. If I added a new resource and typed it wrong, it would give me an error, said it couldn't find that resource. But I'll go ahead and pick next and finish. And I'm still filtered on Armstrong. And I think I changed, yep, here we go. I have 20 hours here and 20 hours here versus the 16, 40 here. So very easy to verify. And again, if I were to just, and you can filter on multiple elements at the same time. If I pick my PM forecast, I could verify that, yep, that was the total number of hours in my file. Any questions before I'm going to jump to reporting? Okay. Sometimes the financial analyst or the PCA doing the validation isn't enough. Program manager or the control account manager may want to look at it as well. And that's usually where reporting comes into play. Report Wizard is going to bring me up a list of all of the reports that I have saved, all my personal ones, any shared ones I can filter down by category. But I'm going to run the report that I ran just a little while ago. Shows me a list of my 5 most recent, but I want to change to my awesome project here. And I'm just going to kind of go through some of these pretty quickly, and I'm going to come back and run it a little bit differently in a moment. And my PM forecast and my EAC, I'm just going to go ahead and hit finish. And I see, here's what my PM forecast was, or is, here's what it was, and here's the variance. I'm able to see that by control account because that's how I ran this report, and I see it by month. All the way over to the right, I'll have, a total, my cumulative total by control account, and of course, grand totals are presented at the bottom. Each report has a data tab, which is tabular presentation of the data that was used for the report. A lot of folks like to use this to filter, maybe pivot. Cobra does have a built-in pivot table or pivot report, but you can pick as many fields as you need to, run it, and it'll open up Microsoft Excel in pivot mode. I'm going to go ahead and close this report and run it a little bit differently. Also have the ability to apply filters, and I'm going to apply an Armstrong filter. So basically, that's just where the resource is Armstrong. I could, apply. It's a simple filter in this case. You could have one, more complex, looking at a couple of different. Maybe look at where the resource is Armstrong, and I don't know. Maybe you only care about a particular CLIN, so you can limit it like that. I'm going to, let's see, I'm not sure if it'll work. I didn't test it this way, but I added in, let's organize it by CLIN and then by control account. So any of these options that are populated on your project, you can slice and dice the data that way. So really the reporting engine is very flexible right out of the bat. It doesn't take doesn't really take any IT support to do this. Your regular users would have access, typically would have access to this. Access control, you can limit who can do what, which processes they can run or can't run. So you can provides some limitations, but generally most folks are able to run a report and make changes to any of the save functions on the report. I'm going to pick a quarterly calendar instead of monthly. I'm going to leave everything else the same. I'm not going to save it. And it did not like the CLIN is my guess. So that's what I get for going off of my script. I'll just pick my awesome, apply my filter. I'll just leave that like that. And now I'll finish. So now instead of in monthly buckets, they're in quarterly. And I could have a mixed calendar where maybe I have quarterly for maybe the first year or two, and then you could have annual buckets after that, you know, way out in the future. Maybe you don't have as much fidelity yet. And again, that's all user controlled. I do want to show, you know, I showed how easy it was to modify, report that away. There's also, oops, on the report properties, we've got, you know, there's a whole bunch of detail and a whole bunch of other functions and features that can be enabled or disabled. Usually, your basic users, you probably wouldn't grant them access to this, because they may go in and go, oh, I'm going to rewrite Cobra reports this morning, and by 10 o'clock, they've made enough changes that none of the reports run. So this is something generally that access is limited. But for example, on this report, I didn't save it with my change to calendar set 04. So I can just say I want to always run it with calendar set 04. And then do something like allow selected data set. And there is a lot of help within Cobra to help an advanced user navigate through this. I'm going to change that to a 0. So basically now the user's not going to be able to change that calendar. So, you know, see this more with large companies. They may develop a handful of Cobra reports, you know, maybe 4 or 5 that they use for some sort of internal review, that they want them run this exact way every time. They'll set those up. They'll disable a lot of these selections and force users to run it only the way that they want it run. So I'm going to make that change and one other change. And I'm going to apply that. And I'm going to run that report again. But it likes that other project today. I'm not going to worry about the filter. But now if I pick my, I'll leave that alone. Did you notice I didn't have the screen for the calendar this time? Where before it showed calendar set 00, I picked a different one. Since I turned that off and said, nope, we're not going to allow that selection, that calendar screen doesn't even show up. And I'll just go ahead and finish, and it runs a quarterly, but the user, you know, doesn't have the ability to change it. And all the way at the bottom, you do have the option to show what options were selected when you ran the report. So you know, it's real easy. You might get 4 or 5 reports open, and you can't remember which was which or which was run with which set of options. So there's, you know, you can always see those at the bottom. Minimize that. The last thing I want to talk about is some exports. But before I jump into that, are there any questions so far?
Hey, Mary, this is Dan. Can you, because the vast majority of the folks on the call are not PPM side, are you going to talk about, you know, why Cobra as opposed to like budgeting and planning, or maybe the other budgeting or forecasting modules that might exist in our other tools, such as, you know, Azure, for example?
Yeah, this is probably as good a time as any. Thanks, Dan, for that reminder. That, you know, why use Cobra versus budgeting and planning or something like that. It often comes down to an earned value requirement. You know, you may have a contract or two where you need that performance piece. That's where it comes into play most often. But really, anyone who wants to apply earned value to their projects to be able to get both schedule and cost performance information, would it be beneficial for them to use Cobra? If your budgeting and forecasting is truly limited to, you know, just what's left for the year, maybe based on, you know, headcount information, then budgeting and planning is going to be a great way to go. But if you're looking to understand your project performance to date, you know, how am I doing? Am I expected to, you know, finish on budget based on what I've done so far? Then Cobra would add some additional fidelity to some of those calculations that you're doing. And I do want to show a few of the exports here. I'm going to run, I think I'll run this cost data export, but we have a few others available. And a lot of these come down to, if you have an earned value requirement, the old IPMR requirement required you to submit an XML file in this UNCE-FACT format directly to the government. They had a site, you'd upload that on a monthly basis, and would usually provide a visual report as well, usually in Excel or PDF or something like that. There's also this cost data option, and I'm going to, I'll go ahead and start a new one. We have two different formats here, the Deltek Common Data format and the IPM DR, which will be renamed IPM DAR sometime soon, which is the new format. The government updated the IPMR guidelines. It's now IPM DAR, D-A-R. Doesn't roll off the tongue very well. And it uses the new JSON format rather than the XML UNCE-FACT. The Deltek Cobra, or the Deltek Common Data format here, was something that, you know, Deltek's been working on, oh gosh, and Dan, you may know, it's been for years, kind of waiting on this guidance for the IPM DAR. We kind of knew what data was going to be required to export, but we really weren't sure yet. So we were kind of working on it. This format can be exported to and then be imported into Winsight and to Acumen. So either one of those can use this common format or this new IPM DAR format. And let me actually, I'll walk through. They're very similar. I believe I have a Winsight one here. And it's the same kind of deal. You know, you go through, you pick, you're able to pick the level of data that you want to export, pick your classes. Let me get to another screen. You know, do I want to bring in, you know, this looks at cost sets, which are collection of classes, of what data you want to export. So quite a few options. This could then be, when I finished, this could be updated directly to the government site, could be imported into Winsight, to be reviewed. Typically, folks will load it into Winsight, review it before they send the file off to their customer or to the government. Also, the ability up under Tools, there's a SQL commands utility. So, you know, you could go in and run a SQL command against the Cobra database. And if the database has both Cobra and OpenPlan and maybe even PM Compass in the same database, you can run queries against that data as well. So I'm not sure if, you know what, let's put in a project that I know exists. And it gives me, you know, just basic data. I could certainly, I said, you know, select all. I could pick various columns, and of course you can make it a more complex, linking different tables, you know, standard SQL functionality. But then I could save this to Excel if I wanted to. So depending on what type of data you need, it's not. I've seen some clients where they have a query or two that pulls data in a very particular format, rather than a report that they use to feed some other big spreadsheet tool or something along those lines. And this is one area where within the security model, you can grant access to this SQL command utility, but you can specifically not allow users to run like update and delete type queries. So they could do more or less selects only. Because yeah, that could get pretty bad if folks were able to accidentally delete some data. Any other questions?
This is Gary. Do we have like
that was all. Oh.
Sorry. Do we have any like feature, but other than earned value, do we have any other feature comparison between like budgeting and planning and Cobra, or any type of decision tree that would help people to say, well, or kind of help us to guide people to either Cobra or BNP?
That would be a great thing to develop. I know resource management comes into play.
We do.
Oh,
So
do we?
Justin,
Okay.
yeah, Gary, Justin had put something together a while back, and I think he recently updated. When I say recently, within the last 6 months or so. So it's not fully inclusive, but it is. It does do a pretty good job of helping folks sort of make a decision on, you know, kind of what way they should go. Okay. So we can provide that to you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Or Dan, anything else you'd like me to point out?
Just one thing, I guess, Mary, from the standpoint of when you talked about the use of Cobra being sort of, you know, kind of the earned value tool, we do have a lot of customers who use it specifically for proposals. So, you know,
yeah.
and you were pointing out like top-down planning. So maybe just a quick blurb, and you don't know that you have to necessarily show anything, but maybe why folks might want to go down that path as well.
Okay. Yeah, great. And actually, I've worked with some clients that use looking for a proposal pricing solution as well. So again, you know, maybe they're using a schedule, maybe not, data in an Excel file that works fine just the same. It's very easy to bring data in to Cobra and then submit your proposal. Very easy to generate some reports that show the various breakouts that you want to present to your customer or, potential customer. But then 6 months later, they come back and go, oh, we've changed the start date of the contract. It's now moved out 6 months. So the slip functionality would enable you to move everything out maybe 6 months or move it out to a new start date. And again, that would be the entire project, or maybe the scope hasn't completely changed. They're just delaying a second phase. So you would be able to, very easily, and I'm just going to randomly pick my project here, pick a little bit as to which elements you want to move out to the right or move into the left. Likewise, top-down planning would enable you to go, okay, they've made some reductions here. We want to reduce our engineering support by 10%. So you could just wholesale reduce all engineering by a certain percentage. But with the different classes, you could still have your original proposal out there and then make these changes in a copy where I did that reclass and copy it for a new version of the proposal. So then you can compare. Here was the old, here's the new, here are the deltas. And likewise, if you've had new rates since that time, it's very easy to apply those new rates to see what that cost impact will be. So really for proposals, you have quite a bit of functionality here that would certainly come into play. Any other questions or, oh, please.
Yeah, does this, does everything have to be posted in cost point for this to be updated with the interface, or can it pull in like BNP can, it can pull in unposted vouchers or unposted timesheets? It can do real-time reporting too at this point, or is that even considered?
That's a good question, Gary. It only pulls in what's been processed and posted at this point. Okay. At least that's how that native integration between CostPoint and Cobra works. So you could certainly pull the data out by other means, if you wanted to load it into Cobra, but to that native integration is just posted transactions. Just posted transaction. And then is there any manual effort or reconciliation effort to make sure that the information that is being passed or that's in Cobra right now is in sync with what's in CostPoint as far as costs and actuals, like count or something, they forget to map or something? Is there something, there is some manual process? There would certainly be a manual process. There would be a log. You'd be able to look at the log, and you could have the schedule to run overnight, for example. You come in on Tuesday morning, you look at the log and see if there's any errors. And if there were, a new resource or maybe a new work package, it would tell you that okay, data wasn't found and, and that it errored out. And it also creates an error file that only contains the records that errored. Okay. So if you have a large, the file may have 10,000 rows, but maybe only 10 errored, there would be an error file that had just those 10 records in it. So then you knew exactly, which ones you had to deal with. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, with that, I thank everyone for participating, and I believe Dan Domingos is going to be next with Winsight sometime soon. I can't wait for that. When I complete this meeting and stop the recording, I'll convert that over and I'll send everyone a link to the recording later this afternoon or tomorrow. Thank you all and have a nice day.
Thanks.